The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss as people moved in and out of the busy store. Shopping carts rattled. Cashiers called out totals. And in the middle of it all stood a man no one paid attention to. Simple clothes. Calm posture. No rush. No noise. He picked up a few items, quietly checking labels like any ordinary customer. Nothing about him stood out. Nothing, except the way a store employee kept watching him. From a distance at first, then closer, eyes narrowing, judging. The man didn't notice, or maybe he did, but chose to ignore it. He moved to another aisle, still calm, still focused. But the employee wasn't alone anymore. A second worker joined, then a third. Whispers, glances, suspicion growing, for no clear reason. Keep an eye on him, one of them muttered. That's when things started to feel different. Not loud, not obvious, but uncomfortable. The kind of tension you can feel, even without words. A few nearby customers slowed down, sensing something was off. The man reached for an item on the shelf, simple, normal. But before he could even place it in his basket, a voice cut through the air. Hey, what do you think you're doing? The aisle went quiet. Heads turned. The man slowly looked up, calm, confused, but not intimidated. Yes, he replied politely. The employee stepped closer, arms crossed, tone sharp. We've been watching you. No greeting, no explanation, just accusation. The man paused for a second, processing. Still composed. Is there a problem? He asked. But instead of answering, the employee gave a cold look. You tell me. Now people were definitely watching. Phones subtly coming out. Whispers spreading. Something about this didn't feel right. The man stood there, not raising his voice, not reacting emotionally. Just calm. Just steady. As if he knew something no one else did. But the employees? They were already convinced. Already judging. Already crossing a line they didn't even realize. And the worst part? They had no idea who they were dealing with. Not even close. Because the man they were about to humiliate was the last person they should have messed with. And what happened next? Turned this ordinary store into something no one would ever forget. The employee's voice didn't soften. If anything, it got sharper. We've been watching you for a while, he said, stepping even closer. You've been moving around too much. Not buying anything. That looks suspicious. The man blinked once, still calm. I'm just shopping, he replied. Taking my time. A simple answer. Respectful. Normal. But it didn't matter. The employee shook his head slightly, like he had already made up his mind. Yeah, that's what they all say. That line changed everything. You could feel it. The tone wasn't just suspicious anymore. It was personal. A second employee stepped in beside him, arms folded. We've had issues here before, she added. People walking around, pretending to shop. Then things go missing. The implication hung in the air. Heavy. Uncomfortable. The man looked between them, still not raising his voice. If there's a concern, you can check whatever you need, he said calmly, slightly opening his hands. I haven't taken anything. No anger. No panic. Just confidence. But instead of easing the situation, it seemed to irritate them more. Don't tell us how to do our job, the first employee snapped. Now more people had stopped to watch. A small circle forming at the end of the aisle. Some pretending to browse, but clearly listening. Others not even hiding it. Phones were out now. Recording. Because something about this moment didn't feel right. It felt unfair. The man shifted his weight slightly, but didn't step back. Didn't walk away. Didn't argue. That calmness. It was starting to stand out. Look, he said again, steady voice. If you think I've done something wrong, call your manager. I'm not going anywhere. That should have ended it. But instead, it escalated. Oh, we will, the second employee said quickly. And maybe security too. The word security echoed louder than it should have. Now the tension was real. A few people exchanged looks. One woman whispered, "This is getting out of hand." But no one stepped in. Not yet. The man nodded slightly. All right, he said. Call whoever you need. Still calm. Still controlled. And that's what made it even more intense. Because the employees were getting louder, more aggressive, while he stayed exactly the same. And that contrast? Everyone could see it. Everyone could feel it. Pause for a second. What would you do here? Would you stay calm like him? Or just walk away from this situation? Be real. Type calm or walk away in the comments. The employee pulled out his phone, pretending to call someone, but his eyes never left the man, as if waiting for him to slip, to react, to give them a reason. But it wasn't happening. The man simply stood there, quiet, patient, unshaken, and somehow, that made the situation even worse for them, because now it didn't look like they were in control anymore. It looked like they were pushing too far. A young guy in the crowd raised his phone higher, making sure everything was in frame. Another person whispered, "Why are they treating him like that?" No one had an answer. And the employees? They didn't seem to care. They had already decided who he was, already judged him, already crossed a line, and they had no idea just how big of a mistake that was. Because instead of backing down, the man was about to do something no one in that store was ready for. The word security changed the atmosphere instantly. What started as a quiet misunderstanding was now turning into a public scene. One of the employees stepped aside, speaking quickly into his phone. His voice was low, but urgent. "Yeah, we've got someone here, acting suspicious. Might need assistance." That was enough. Now it wasn't just an accusation. It was escalation. The man stood still, his posture relaxed, but his presence steady. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't defensive. If anything, he looked more grounded than anyone else in that aisle. But the people around him? They could feel it. The tension was growing. A couple standing nearby slowly backed their cart away, not wanting to get involved. Others leaned in slightly, curiosity taking over. Phones were no longer subtle. They were fully out now, recording everything. Because deep down, everyone knew. This wasn't normal. "You should have just cooperated from the start," the first employee said, his tone now louder, almost trying to justify what was happening. The man looked at him calmly. "I am cooperating," he replied. "You just haven't asked me anything clearly." That response hit differently. Not aggressive, not emotional, just honest. And that made it harder for the employees to control the narrative. For a brief moment, there was silence. But it didn't last. "Don't play smart," the second employee snapped. "We know how this works." The assumption, the judgment, still there, still strong. The man exhaled slowly, glancing around at the people watching. Not in fear, but awareness. He knew exactly what this looked like. A public accusation, a quiet man being cornered, and a crowd waiting to see how it ends. A few steps away, a woman whispered to her friend, "This doesn't seem right." Her friend nodded, eyes fixed on the scene. Meanwhile, a young teenager raised his phone higher, making sure every angle was captured. This wasn't just an incident anymore. It was becoming something bigger, something that people would talk about, or post about, or remember. The man shifted slightly, placing his basket down beside him. A small action, but it said a lot. He wasn't leaving, not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. "Look," he said again, voice still controlled. "If there's a real issue, let's handle it properly. No need to make this a scene." But the scene had already been made. "You already made it one," the first employee replied quickly. "We're just finishing it." That line drew a few quiet reactions from the crowd. Some confused, some uncomfortable, because now it was clear. This wasn't about solving anything. This was about proving a point. And the man? He was the target. In the distance, the sound of footsteps approached. Heavy, quick, security. The pressure increased instantly. A uniformed guard appeared at the end of the aisle, scanning the situation before walking over. "What's going on here?" he asked. The employees wasted no time. "We caught him acting suspicious," one of them said, refusing to cooperate. That wasn't true, and people around knew it. You could see it in their faces. But no one had stepped in yet. The guard looked at the man, then at the employees, then back again. The man met his eyes calmly. "No problem here," he said. "I'm just waiting for this to be handled fairly." That word, fairly, lingered, because fairness was exactly what seemed missing. Right now, people from all over the world see moments like this every day. So tell me, which country and which city are you watching from? The crowd had grown even larger now. People from different backgrounds, different perspectives, but all watching the same moment unfold. Some shook their heads, others whispered quietly, and a few were starting to look at the employees differently, because something had shifted. The man wasn't looking like the problem anymore. They were. The security guard took a step closer, lowering his voice. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me. There it was. The turning point. A public request. Or a public test. The man didn't move immediately. He simply looked at the guard for a second, then nodded once. Slowly, calmly, as if he had already decided how this was going to play out. And as he took his first step forward, no one in that store realized. They had just pushed this situation too far. The aisle stayed quiet as the man took a slow step forward. Not rushed, not forced, just controlled. The security guard walked beside him, slightly ahead, as if leading, but not quite in control. Behind them, the employees followed, still watching, still convinced they were right. But something had changed. The energy wasn't the same anymore. The crowd began moving too, keeping a careful distance while pretending not to. A few people whispered, "Why is he so calm? I don't know, but this feels off." And they were right, because the man didn't look like someone caught doing something wrong. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked like someone who had already seen situations like this before and knew exactly how they ended. As they reached the front area of the store, more eyes turned toward them. Cashiers paused mid-scan. Customers stopped unloading their carts. Even the background noise seemed to fade. This was no longer a small moment in an aisle. This was now the center of attention. "Stand right here," the guard said, gesturing near the customer service desk. The man nodded and stopped. Again, no resistance. No attitude. Just quiet confidence. The employees quickly stepped forward, eager to explain themselves. "He's been acting suspicious since he walked in," one of them said. "Moving around, not buying anything, avoiding eye contact." "That's not true." A voice suddenly cut in. It came from behind the crowd. Soft, but clear enough to stop everything. People turned. A middle-aged man stepped forward slowly, holding his phone. "I've been watching this since the beginning," he continued. "He hasn't done anything wrong." The employees hesitated for a second, not expecting that, not expecting someone to speak up. "He's just shopping," the man added. "You're the ones making it a problem." A few heads in the crowd nodded. Agreement. Quiet, but growing. The balance was shifting. The security guard glanced between both sides, uncertainty starting to creep into his expression. Because now it wasn't just one story. It was two, and one of them didn't look very good. The man being accused remained silent, watching, listening, still calm, still patient, as if he didn't need to defend himself anymore, because the situation was starting to do that for him. Another voice joined in. "Yeah, I saw it too," a woman said from the side. They approached him first. Now the whispers were louder. Not about him, but about them. The employees exchanged quick looks. Something wasn't going the way they expected. Their confidence slowly cracking. But still, they didn't back down. "Well, we're just doing our job," one of them said, trying to regain control. "We can't take chances." That sentence hung in the air, because now it sounded different. Less like responsibility, more like justification. The security guard exhaled quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. This wasn't simple anymore. Not at all. The man finally spoke again, calm as ever. "If there's a real concern," he said, "check the cameras. That will tell you everything." A simple solution. Clear, fair, and impossible to argue with. For a moment, no one responded. Because deep down, everyone knew what that would show. The truth. And the truth wasn't on the employee's side. A young employee near the register whispered to another, "Wait, I feel like I've seen him before." The other frowned slightly, looking closer. "Yes, same." They squinted, trying to place it, trying to understand why this man, this calm, quiet man, felt so familiar. But they couldn't quite figure it out. Not yet. And that uncertainty, it spread. From one person to another. From doubt to realization. Something was off. Something they were missing. Something important. The employees stood there, still holding their ground. Still trying to stay in control. But the control was slipping. Bit by bit. Right in front of everyone. And the man they had chosen to humiliate? He hadn't even begun to show them who he really was. Not even close. Because the moment that truth came out, everything in that store was about to change. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Not empty, but heavy. The kind of silence where everyone is waiting for something to happen. The employees stood there, trying to hold their ground. The security guard looked unsure. The crowd, watching closely, and the man, still calm, still composed. But something about him had changed. Not his tone, not his posture, but his presence. It felt stronger now, like he had decided it was time. He took a small step forward. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just enough to be noticed. "I've been patient," he said, his voice steady but firmer than before. "I've answered your questions. I've stayed respectful." He paused for a second, letting his words settle. "But this," he continued, glancing around at the crowd, "this isn't right." That line hit. You could feel it ripple through the people watching, because everyone knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't about shopping anymore. This was about how he was being treated. The employees shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable now. But one of them tried to push back. "We're just doing our job," he said again, though his voice lacked the same confidence as before. The man nodded slowly. "And your job should be done fairly," he replied. "Not based on assumptions. Direct, clear, and impossible to ignore." A few people in the crowd murmured in agreement. One man even said quietly, "He's right." That was the moment the balance fully shifted. The employees weren't in control anymore. The crowd wasn't on their side anymore. And the man? He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to argue, because his calm was louder than anything else in that store. The security guard cleared his throat slightly. "Maybe we should just review the cameras," he suggested, his tone softer now. A smart move, a safe move, but it was already too late for things to go back to normal. The man looked at him and nodded once. "That's all I've been asking for," he said. Simple, fair, reasonable. And yet, somehow, it had taken this long to get there. One of the employees glanced around, noticing the phones still recording. The whispers, the looks, the judgment now aimed at them. That's when it started to sink in. This wasn't going their way. Not at all. The man picked up his basket again. Slowly, calmly, like none of this had shaken him. Like he had been in control the entire time. And maybe he had. "Before we go any further," he added, looking directly at the employees, "just understand something." His voice didn't rise, but it carried. Through the crowd, through the tension, through the moment. You don't get to decide who someone is just by looking at them. That line landed harder than anything before, because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone watching. Everyone who had ever been judged. Everyone who had ever been misunderstood. The crowd went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was respect. The employees didn't respond. They couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. And for the first time since this started, they looked unsure, uncomfortable, even nervous. The security guard gestured slightly. "Let's head to the office," he said, more respectful now. The man nodded. No resistance, no hesitation, just calm agreement. But as he began to walk, something shifted again. Not in him, in the crowd. A voice, barely above a whisper, came from behind. "Wait." Another voice followed. "Is that him?" People started looking closer. Really looking this time. Not at what they assumed, but at who he actually was. The realization was building. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. And in just a few seconds, everything they thought they knew about this man was about to change completely. The man stopped walking for a moment. Not because he was told to, but because the energy behind him changed. The whispers got louder. The confusion turned into curiosity. And curiosity was turning into recognition. "I swear I've seen him somewhere before." That face, wait. No way. The crowd started leaning in closer, trying to get a better look. Not at a suspect, not at a problem, but at the man they had completely misjudged just minutes ago. The employees, who were so confident before, now looked uneasy. One of them squinted, trying to place his face. Another pulled out his phone, quickly searching something. Then, it happened. A sudden realization hit a man near the front. His eyes widened. His phone dropped slightly in his hand. "No, that's not possible." He looked up again, looked harder, and then he said it out loud. "That's him." The entire store seemed to pause. Even the security guard turned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. The man didn't answer immediately. He just showed his phone screen, and on it was a photo, a well-known public figure. Manny Pacquiao, a world champion, A global icon. A man recognized across continents. For a second, no one spoke. It didn't register instantly for everyone. But then it spread. Like a wave. Wait, what? No way. That's Manny Pacquiao. Suddenly, everything in the store changed. The tension didn't disappear. It flipped. Instantly, the employees froze. Their expressions shifted from confidence to shock, then disbelief, then panic. One of them stepped back slightly. "Are you serious right now?" he whispered. The man with the phone nodded. "Google it." That was all it took. Phones started moving faster now. Searches, images, confirmation, and every result said the same thing. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was real. The man they had accused, the man they had cornered, was someone the entire world respected. The security guard straightened his posture immediately. His tone changed. "Sir, I didn't realize." But the man raised his hand slightly, stopping him, not aggressively, just calmly. "There's no need," he said, and that made it even heavier. Because he wasn't angry. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. He was just there, composed, unshaken. The employees now looked completely different. The confidence they had earlier? Gone. One of them tried to speak. We didn't know," but stopped halfway. Because what could you even say at this point? The man looked at them for a moment. Not with hatred, not with revenge, but with something worse. Disappointment. "You don't need to know who someone is," he said quietly, "to treat them with respect." That line hit harder than anything else in the entire situation. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was truth. Simple. Undeniable. The crowd stayed silent. But now it was a different kind of silence. Respect. Awareness. Even guilt. Some people lowered their phones slightly. Others just watched, taking it in. The security guard cleared his throat again. "Sir, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding." This time, it felt real. The man nodded slightly. "I appreciate that," he said. No anger. No ego. No revenge. Just calm resolution. But before he walked away, he paused one last time. Looked at the employees. Not harshly. Not emotionally. Just directly. And said, "Next time, don't assume." Then he turned and walked out of the store. Slow. Calm. Unbothered. The same way he walked in. But behind him, everything had changed. The employees stood frozen. The crowd was silent. And one truth had fully settled in everyone's mind. They didn't just misjudge a customer. They had almost humiliated the wrong man. Completely. The automatic doors slid open again. A soft whoosh. And just like that, he was gone. Outside, the noise of the store faded behind him. But inside, nobody moved for a few seconds. It was like the entire place was still processing what had just happened. The employees stood frozen near the counter. The same people who were confident, who were loud, who were sure they were doing the right thing, now couldn't even look at each other properly. The security guard exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. "This could have been handled very differently," he said quietly. No one replied. Because everyone knew. The mistake wasn't small. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a public humiliation attempt based on assumption. And it had backfired completely. One of the employees finally spoke, voice low. "I didn't know it was him." Another shook his head. "That's not the point." Silence again. Because that was the point. Outside the store, the man continued walking calmly through the parking lot. No rush. No anger. No drama. Just steady steps. Like none of it had touched him. Like it didn't weigh on him at all. But inside the store, the story had already left. Phones had recorded everything. Clips were already being uploaded. Comments were already starting. Within minutes. Then hours. Then the next day, it spread. Fast. People reacted everywhere. Not just to who he was, but to how he behaved. No shouting. No revenge. No humiliation back. Just calm dignity. And that's what made it powerful. News pages picked it up. Social media exploded with debates. Disrespecting someone based on appearance is unacceptable. Respect costs nothing. Imagine if he wasn't famous, would they still apologize? The question hit harder than anything else. Because that was the real issue. Not fame, not identity, but bias, judgment, assumption. Meanwhile, in the store, management arrived later that day. Meetings were held. Statements were reviewed. The employees were questioned. Consequences followed quietly. Not loudly, not publicly, but seriously enough for them to understand the weight of what happened. The security guard replayed the moment in his mind again and again. The calm voice, the respectful tone, the way the situation could have been de-escalated early, if only they had listened. Days later, a short message from the man circulated online. No anger, no accusations, just a reminder. Respect people first. Titles come later. That single line was shared thousands of times. Because it wasn't just about a store. It wasn't just about employees. It was about everyone, everywhere. And that was the real impact. Not the humiliation, not the confrontation, but the message left behind. Back at the store, things slowly returned to normal. Customers came and went. Carts rolled through aisles again. Cashiers scanned items like usual. But something had changed. People were more aware now, more careful, more conscious of how quickly judgment can turn into mistake, and how quickly a moment can turn into regret. The employees who were involved never spoke publicly about it again, but they didn't forget it either. Because some lessons don't come from training. They come from moments you can't undo. And for them, this was one of those moments. Outside, life moved on, as it always does. But the story stayed, not because of conflict, but because of how it ended. With calm, with dignity, and with a reminder that stayed far beyond that store. Never judge someone before you understand who they really are.